Joining me now is Shark Tank judge Kevin O'Leary. He is, of course, also the chair of O'Leary Ventures. Kevin, nice to see you. I offered some of these same thoughts on radio yesterday, and the listener response was none too happy. They say, oh, Musk was in it for himself. He had access to our own private data, and he was cruel in his approach. You would say what?
No, I think he was honest in terms of his objectives. He said he could save money for the taxpayer. That should be a bipartisan activity. I believe it was. I thought he brought forward into the taxpayer psyche a new idea of auditing government in perpetuity, which I find extremely interesting because no one's ever done it quite that way. What he did experience is what most people do. Washington is a very nasty, nasty place. And the closer you get to the sun, the more your feathers get burned. That's for everybody. He found out the hard way. That's okay. It's a good learning lesson. And I've only started going to Washington for the last 3 years, and I've realized how tough it is. I thought he did a masterful job. And most people, even though lots were offended by the speed at which he went at it, or maybe the way he implemented it, at the end of the day, taxpayers would like to save money, period. And I don't know why everybody can't get behind that. The more you think about what he did, the more you should applaud it.
So I think you've just answered my poll question from Kevin O'Leary's perspective. Which was the bigger impediment? You don't think it was his methodology. You think it's the bureaucracy and the built-in institutional fiefdoms.
Yes, I believe that to be correct. But in the end, what we've learned is there's a value to the check and balance in Washington. You think about the three different impediments you've got. You've got the executive. You certainly have Congress. And you have the judiciary. I mean, you have to deal with all of them. You can't just mandate, save $1 billion here, save $1 billion there. You have to actually go through the system. And that's where the system grinds you down. You can make the recommendation, but if it can't be executed on, you have no power. You know, as an employee for 130 days, you wield no power. The only power you have is given to you by the executive, the president. But even he can't jam it through Congress. And that's what we learned. But at the end of the day, is the idea a good idea? Of course it is. Imagine saving $1 trillion. If you in fact did that, it would tell you how inefficient government is, what a waste it is, what a horrific outcome to learn that. At the same time, you want the savings. That's why Doge, that brand, is now, let's call it, impregnated into the minds of taxpayers everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're red or blue. Who doesn't want to save money?
I'm worried that the approach has now poisoned the well. Because of the haphazard, the slipshod way in which this was attempted, the next time somebody's willing to step into the lion's den and have a serious conversation about waste, fraud, and abuse, people are going to say, oh, well, they tried that with Elon Musk and it didn't go so well. Where do we go from here?
I think it doesn't go away. I think, taxpayers, I don't believe, trust government as much as they did 20 or 30 years ago. And that uneasiness stays there. The biggest problem we have right now is what you detailed at the top of the show. We've got almost a $3 trillion deficit in this proposed tax bill. And there's lots of other problems in this tax bill as well. I'm not sure you're aware of this, and you might want to look at it, but I'm a huge advocate for small business. I read this bill. Very few people read it. And I found something quite shocking in there that I'm actually lobbying against right now. If you took government support money as a small business called the ERC program, the IRS wants to audit you for 9 years. The law says 3. They're going to change the law to make it 9. You can't finance your business anymore. We can't have that. This is something that's slipping through the bill. It's a pimple on the big, beautiful bill. But that's the kind of thing that's going to go through the meat grinder now of the House. And I think overall, listening to this deficit just growing, as you call it, the wolf outside the door, is getting pretty scary. You're right, rates have doubled. This is really almost 7% of GDP. We're right at the upper limits. And the only thing I will say that you should consider is when they scored this deficit out for the years ahead, they assumed the United States economy would grow less than 2%. I find that way, way, way offside. This economy grows 5%.
Quick final question. Give me the 30-second answer. Can he still sell sneakers to Republicans? I'm thinking of Michael Jordan, of course. But going back to Tesla now, it seems like he's alienated the progressive purchasers of those vehicles. And yet conservatives haven't embraced the whole EV movement the way that liberals have. So what's the future of Tesla?
Well, I'm a Tesla shareholder. My assumption, along with other shareholders as well, is within 3 or 4 weeks, people will forget about his little jaunt to Washington as they see him work harder on SpaceX and Tesla. I think we'll do okay. I think the time of burning dealers down and keying Tesla cars, those days are over. If you want an electric car, there isn't a better one in the world, and that's what matters the most. Is it a good product? The answer is yes. I think we'll all be rewarded as shareholders, and if you own one of these cars, you'll be happy as it starts to become autonomous driving for you.
Kevin O'Leary, thank you for being here. I appreciate your insight.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, for Elon Musk, it's time to get out of Doge. I'm Michael Smerconish. Today in New York City, he had to leave. As a special government employee, Musk reached his limit of 130 days of service. Musk's exit led to a joint Trump-Musk presser yesterday. Trump thanked Musk for his service to America. Musk noted he still expects to achieve the $1 trillion in cuts that he promised, and both think he'll be back.
I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
Some speculated the farewell was not so fond, especially after Musk several days ago threw some shade on the latest economic bill supported by the White House because of his concerns that it would add to the deficit and debt. Back in November, I had a poll question at Smerconish.com. I asked when this bromance would end. Here was the result. Nearly half thought that it wouldn't last 100 days, but it did. But where he worked in the White House longer than the first 100 days, but not until the midterms, I guess 27% came the closest. I know that many of you are thrilled that Elon Musk is gone. I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I don't like the way that Doge went about its job, mostly anonymous, totally rogue, outside the lines. Yes, erratic, seemingly unplanned as far as I can tell, inconsistent as to the edicts. You're fired if you don't summarize your week. Oh no, you're not. Still, according to Doge, they saved the government around $170 billion. Many challenge that number, but even if it's half that or less, it's better than nothing. On top of which, I'm willing to give Musk and President Trump some credit for sparking a conversation about waste, fraud, and abuse. The first that I can recall since Simpson Bowles was debated on President Obama's watch back in 2010. I just wish it hadn't been so misguided. Irie Sentner, writing for Politico, observed the following. Musk was a creature of Silicon Valley, a scion of the PayPal mafia, whose leadership and willingness to take big risks propelled him to unparalleled wealth and influence. Washington, he would soon discover, was an entirely different beast. And in the end, it proved too unwieldy for Musk to truly leave his mark. He was a man used to breaking things in order to put them back together in his own image. But the fiefdoms of Trump's Washington proved shatter-resistant, sending the world's richest man scrambling back to his other ventures. I find that to be so depressing. Count me among the many who has lamented the absence of critical thinking, disruptive influencers within the bureaucracy. If only a Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos would apply their savvy to Washington, I've often said. Sometimes on radio, I go so far as to joke that if Steve Jobs had lived and applied himself to a problem, one that bedevils all of us, he'd have come up with a permanent solution to the bane of our existence. Potholes. And such is my reverence for Jobs that I actually mean it. Well, Musk at least stepped into the arena. He was willing to take his lumps. He made a great effort at personal sacrifice. I think he really did want to streamline government and reduce our $37 trillion in debt. That's over 100 G's per person, by the way. President Trump, I'm not so sure. He never spoke of our debt during the campaign. I've always worried that his objective was to remake government in his image, and if we reduce the debt along the way, well, that would be an added Benny. And I think any savings that Trump could demonstrate might be used as a justification for a tax cut in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, over which, as noted above, Musk has parted company with the president.
I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly. Which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
Here's something else from that Politico piece that I quoted. It says, behind the scenes, though, Musk was clashing with some of the cabinet secretaries whose agencies he was hell-bent on hollowing. Reports of these and sometimes profane interactions between Musk and other top administration officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, began to surface in news reports, and Musk and Peter Navarro, Trump's trade guru, publicly sparred over Musk's disagreement with Trump's sprawling tariff regime. Again, not in defense of a haphazard approach that generated many debunked claims, but I doubt I'm alone in appreciating that somebody was willing to stand up and demand accountability even from cabinet secretaries. That, too, long overdue. I read two things this week with relevance to our deficit and debt. The first was from Peter Orszag. He was President Obama's director of OMB. He wrote an essay for the New York Times, and he warned the following: "The wolf is now lurking much closer to our door. Annual federal budget deficits are running at 6% of GDP or higher, compared with well under 3% a decade ago. Interest rates on 10-year treasuries have more than doubled, around 4.5% now versus over just 2% then. And in the current fiscal year, the government is projected to spend more on interest payments than on defense, Medicaid, or Medicare. That's right. Our borrowing now costs us more each year than each of these big essential budget items." And with regard to the big, beautiful bill, Orszag said this: "In its current form, the budget legislation moving through Congress would only exacerbate the challenges we face by further expanding the deficit. But the first step toward fiscal health is not any specific bill or policy proposal. It's to recognize that our fiscal risks are alarmingly elevated, that we won't make much progress on the trade deficit unless we reduce its twin, the budget deficit."